Early morning light filtered through the curtains. Daniel Hayes opened his eyes, head pounding after a chaotic night of blizzard and confusion. Before him, a strange woman, hair slightly tousled, standing in his kitchen, wearing his shirt. She turned around, a tired smile on her face. "Do you have coffee? I need to wake up before they arrive." He froze. "Who are you?" She answered softly, voice calm. "Clara Voss, CEO of the company that fired you yesterday morning." He went silent. "And I just discovered they set both of us up." Daniel Hayes, 36 years old, single dad, project engineer at Sterling Group, was fired right before Christmas for security protocol violations. In reality, he had only sent an internal report about financial irregularities through the system, and the recipient was CEO Clara Voss herself, who never read that email. That evening, during a massive blizzard, he drove home with his young daughter when he saw a sports car losing control and sliding off the road. He rushed over, pulled open the car door, and rescued an unconscious woman. He brought her home, warmed her up, changed her wet clothes, and laid her on the sofa. The next morning, he woke up to find her wearing his shirt, making coffee. She was Clara Voss, the person who had signed his termination papers. Both were shocked. She vaguely remembered the car being attacked, the brakes failing. Daniel hesitated. "You thought I sent that email to harm the company, didn't you?" She nodded. "But now I'm not so sure." "Oh, someone wants to silence both of us." Real person detail at the end of the act. Daniel handed her a bracelet he found in her car, engraved with 2CV, stay brave. The blizzard had hit without warning. Daniel had been driving carefully, his 7-year-old daughter Ella asleep in the back seat, when he saw the headlights swerving wildly ahead. His instincts kicked in. He pulled over, ran through knee-deep snow, and found the sports car halfway down an embankment. The woman inside was unconscious, a gash on her forehead, her breath shallow. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" He checked her pulse. Weak, but steady. He couldn't wait for emergency services. The snow was too heavy, the roads too dangerous. He had to get her somewhere warm. Carefully, he lifted her from the car, carried her to his truck, and drove the remaining miles home. At his small house, he laid her on the sofa, covered her with blankets, and checked her vitals again. No broken bones, no signs of internal injury. Just shock and cold. Ella woke up, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, who is that lady?" "Someone who needs help, sweetheart. Can you get me the first aid kit?" "Okay." Daniel cleaned the wound on the woman's forehead, applied antiseptic, and bandaged it carefully. Her clothes were soaked through. He hesitated, then found one of his old shirts and a pair of sweatpants, gently changing her into dry clothes while keeping her covered. He placed a glass of water on the coffee table beside her, along with aspirin for when she woke up. Then he sat in the chair across from her, watching to make sure she was breathing steadily. Ella peeked from the hallway. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" "I think so, honey. Go back to sleep. I'll stay here and watch her." "You're a hero, Daddy." Daniel smiled sadly. "Not a hero, Ella. Just doing what's right." Hours passed. The blizzard howled outside. Daniel dozed off in the chair, exhausted from the day's events. When morning came, the smell of coffee woke him. He opened his eyes slowly, disoriented. The woman was standing in his kitchen, wearing his oversized shirt, her hair slightly messy, pouring coffee into a mug. She turned and saw him awake. "Do you have coffee? I need to wake up before they arrive." Daniel sat up, confused. "Who are you?" She paused, studying him carefully. "Clara Voss, CEO of Sterling Group." His blood ran cold. You're the one who fired me." "I signed the papers, yes, but I didn't know it was you until just now." She walked over, holding the coffee mug. "You saved my life last night. Your car went off the road. I couldn't just leave you there." She sat down on the edge of the sofa. "My brakes failed. Someone tampered with them." Daniel's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I had the car serviced 2 days ago. The brakes were perfect. Last night, they didn't respond at all." She took a sip of coffee, hands trembling slightly. "Someone wanted me dead." Daniel leaned forward. "And you think it's connected to my termination?" "I received a report yesterday. Financial irregularities in the accounting department. The email came from your address." I sent that report, Daniel said. I've found discrepancies in the project budgets, millions unaccounted for. I sent it directly to you. I never saw it. My assistant Victor told me you were leaking confidential data to competitors. He showed me emails, screenshots, everything. He set me up. Clara nodded slowly. And now he's trying to eliminate both of us. Ella appeared in the doorway holding her stuffed bear. Daddy, is the pretty lady staying for breakfast? Clara smiled for the first time. If your dad doesn't mind? Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Clara. Breakfast sounds good. As Ella ran to the kitchen to help, Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out the bracelet Daniel had found. You found this? In your car. I thought you'd want it back. She held it, tears forming in her eyes. My husband gave this to me before he died. I thought I lost it. I'm sorry for your loss. It was 3 years ago. Car accident. She looked up at him. Victor was driving. The words hung in the air like a peon waiting to explode. Clara stayed for a few days because the blizzard hadn't cleared. She observed the simple life of Daniel and 7-year-old Ella, a girl who loved to laugh and enjoyed making hot cocoa for their special guest. For the first time, Clara felt warmth in a small house, a stark contrast to her cold office. In their conversations, Daniel told her he used to be lead engineer, but his supervisor doctored emails, turning him into the data leak guy. Clara gradually realized that her trusted assistant, Victor Lang, had been manipulating files all along. One night she saw Daniel sitting and fixing the furnace, hands shaking from an old injury, still trying to smile. I don't regret it. I just want my daughter to know her father doesn't give up. That sentence left her silent for a long time. The next morning she brought pastries for Ella and said softly, Your dad is a good man. I was wrong. A real person detail at the end of the act. She placed a piece of paper on the table with her signature, the termination order for Daniel with a handwritten note. Canceled. The first morning, Clara woke up on the sofa disoriented. The house smelled like pancakes. Ella was sitting at the small dining table coloring while Daniel flipped pancakes at the stove. Good morning, Clara said, sitting up. Ella beamed. Good morning, Miss Clara. Do you like chocolate chips? I do, actually. Good. Daddy makes the best chocolate chip pancakes. Daniel brought over a plate. It's not gourmet, but it's warm. Clara took a bite. It was simple, sweet, perfect. It's wonderful, thank you. Over breakfast they talked, not about business, not about betrayal, just small things. Ella's school, Daniel's woodworking hobby, Clara's love of old movies. It felt normal, safe, something Clara hadn't felt in years. Later, while Ella napped, Clara and Daniel sat by the fireplace. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Sure. Why did you risk your job to send that report? You must have known it would cause problems. Daniel stared into the fire. Because it was the right thing to do. I've worked in engineering for 15 years. I've seen companies cut corners, hide problems, hurt people. I didn't want to be part of that. Even if it cost you everything, especially then. I want Ella to grow up knowing her father stood for something. Clara felt a lump in her throat. You're a rare kind of person, Daniel. Not rare, just stubborn. She laughed softly. Maybe stubbornness is underrated. The days passed slowly. The snow continued to fall. Clara found herself helping around the house, washing dishes, folding laundry, playing board games with Ella. One afternoon, Ella asked, Miss Clara, do you have kids? Clara's smile faltered. No, sweetheart, I don't. Why not? Ella, that's not polite, Daniel said gently. It's okay, Clara said. I was married once. My husband and I talked about having children, but he passed away before we could. Ella's eyes widened. I'm sorry, Miss Clara. Thank you, honey. Ella hugged her suddenly, fiercely. Clara froze, then slowly wrapped her arms around the little girl, tears slipping down her cheeks. That night, after Ella went to bed, Clara sat at the kitchen table staring at the termination order. Daniel walked in. Can't sleep? Too much on my mind. Want to talk about it? She looked up at him. I destroyed your life based on lies. How can you even stand to be in the same room as me? You were deceived. That's not the same as being cruel. I should have questioned I should have investigated. Maybe, but you're here now. You're trying to make it right. That counts for something. Clara pulled out a pen and wrote across the termination order. Canceled. She signed it and pushed it across the table. I can't undo what happened, but I can do this. Daniel looked at the paper, then at her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to prove Victor's guilt. How? Clara leaned forward. I need to get back into the company servers. There's a backup drive, an old security protocol I set up years ago. If Victor altered files, the originals are still there. Can you access it remotely? No, I need to be physically in the building. Then we wait for the roads to clear, and we go together. Daniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. This isn't just about my job anymore. It's about stopping someone dangerous. Clara nodded. Together, then. Over the next 2 days, they planned. Clara drew diagrams of the building layout. Daniel identified security blind spots from his time working there. Ella, oblivious to the tension, continued to brighten every moment with her laughter. One evening, she asked Clara to braid her hair. Clara hesitated. She'd never done it before, but Ella insisted. As Clara carefully wove the strands, Ella said, "You're really good at this, Miss Clara. I'm just following the pattern. Daddy says patterns are everywhere. You just have to look." Clara smiled. Your daddy is very wise. I know. He's the best daddy in the world. Clara finished the braid and tied it with a ribbon. There. Beautiful. Ella looked in the mirror and grinned. Thank you. As Ella ran off to show Daniel, Clara sat back, feeling something shift inside her. She had spent years building walls, protecting herself, focusing only on business. But here, in this small house, with this kind man and his bright daughter, she felt those walls beginning to crack. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what might happen if they fell. The blizzard cleared. Clara returned to the city. She called Daniel. They're doing the same thing again, this time to me. At headquarters, the board of directors blamed Clara for abuse of power due to a failed acquisition deal. Victor Lang released a fake report, causing the stock price to plummet. Clara was temporarily suspended from her position. In the company's old archives, Daniel found a backup hard drive he had once secured, containing data proving Victor manipulated all the financial records. Twist 1. Clara discovered Victor used to be CFO at the company where her husband worked. The accident that killed her husband years ago, Victor was the driver. She collapsed, sobbing. I trusted him for so many years. Daniel held her shoulder. Don't let him take away the person you still are. Twist 2. Victor sent people to break into Daniel's house, taking Ella hostage to get the hard drive. Daniel chased after them, got his hand broken, but saved his daughter. In the emergency, Clara appeared with the police. She had tracked Victor's GPS from his bracelet to rescue them. Freeze moment. Daniel collapsed. Clara held him, trembling. You idiot. Who gave you permission to save the whole world alone? He smiled weakly. I just wanted my daughter to grow up believing good people don't disappear. When Clara returned to Sterling Group headquarters, the atmosphere was hostile. Board members who once smiled at her now looked away. Whispers followed her through the hallways. Victor stood in the conference room, playing the role of concerned executive perfectly. Clara, we're all worried about you. Perhaps the stress has been too much. Maybe you should take some time off. I don't need time off, Victor. I need answers. Answers to what? The acquisition, the report, the stock crash, all of it traces back to your department. Victor's smile didn't waver. You're upset, understandably. But accusations like that could damage your credibility further. My credibility is fine. Yours, on the other hand, Clara, the board chairman interrupted. We've reviewed the situation. Until a further notice, you're suspended pending investigation. You can't be serious. I'm afraid we are. Security will escort you out. Clara stood frozen as 2 security guards approached. She looked at Victor. He smiled. And in that smile, she saw everything. The manipulation, the years of deception. She left the building with her head high, but her hands were shaking. Outside, Daniel was waiting. How bad is it? I'm out. Suspended. Then we move to Plan B. Plan B? The backup drive. We get the files, we expose them. Clara nodded. It won't be easy. The building is locked down after hours. I still have my old access card. If they haven't deactivated it yet, we can get in through the maintenance entrance. And if they have, then we improvise. That night, they returned to the Sterling Group building. The streets were empty, the offices dark. Daniel swiped his card, the light turned green. We're in. They moved quickly through the maintenance corridors, avoiding security cameras. Clara led the way to the archive room, a dusty basement filled with old file cabinets and outdated equipment. There, Daniel pointed to a locked cabinet in the corner. That's where I hid it. He pulled out a small toolkit and picked the lock. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was the hard drive. Got it. But as they turned to leave, the lights flicked on. Victor stood in the doorway, flanked by two security guards. Going somewhere? Clara stepped forward. Victor, this is over. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're trespassing, stealing company property. This drive contains evidence of your fraud. Does it? Or does it contain more falsified data planted by Mr. Hayes here? Victor smiled. I'm afraid your little rescue mission is going to look very bad in court. Daniel moved protectively in front of Clara. You won't get away with this. I already have. Clara's suspended. You're fired. And now you're both criminals. He nodded to the guards. Detain them. The guards moved forward. Daniel tensed, ready to fight. But Clara pulled out her phone. Victor, do you know what's interesting about modern technology? What? Live streaming. She turned the phone around, showing the recording in progress. Everything you just said? Thousands of people just heard it. Victor's face went pale. You're bluffing. Check your social media. One of the guards pulled out his phone. His eyes widened. Boss, she's not bluffing. It's everywhere. Victor lunged for Clara's phone. But Daniel blocked him, shoving him back. It's over, Victor. Sirens wailed outside. Clara had called the police before entering the building. Officers stormed in, surrounding Victor and the guards. Victor Lang, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. As they cuffed him, Victor looked at Clara with pure hatred. You self-righteous, save it, Clara said coldly. You killed my husband. You destroyed lives. And you did it all for money. Victor sneered. Your husband was weak, just like you. Clara stepped closer. My husband was a good man, and I was blind, but I see clearly now. The police led Victor away. The guards, realizing they were pawns in a larger scheme, cooperated fully. Daniel and Clara stood in the empty archive room, the hard drive still in Daniel's hand. We did it, Clara whispered. Yeah, we did. Then her phone rang, unknown number. She answered. Hello? A distorted voice. You took something from me. Now I'll take something from you. The line went dead. Daniel's phone buzzed. A message. A photo. Ella, tied to a chair, crying. Daniel's heart stopped. No. No. Clara grabbed his arm. What is it? He showed her the photo. They have Ella. Another message. Bring the drive to the old warehouse on 5th, alone, or she dies. Daniel was already moving, running for the exit. Clara chased after him. Daniel, wait, it's a trap. I don't care, that's my daughter. They reached his truck. Daniel's hands were shaking so badly he could barely start the engine. Clara got in beside him. We call the police. No time, he'll kill her. Then we go together. Clara, I said together. They drove through the night, the city blurring past. Daniel's mind was racing. Ella's face, her laugh, her small hand in his. If anything happened to her, he would never forgive himself. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and abandoned. Daniel parked. Stay here. Not a chance, Vachi. They walked in together. The space was vast, empty, echoing. In the center, illuminated by a single overhead light, was Ella, tied to a chair, tears streaming down her face. Daddy! Daniel ran forward, but a figure stepped from the shadows. Not Victor. Someone else. A man in a black mask. The drive. Now. Daniel held it up. Let her go first. You're not in a position to negotiate. Clara stepped forward. Actually, he is. She held up her phone again. Police are already on their way, and this is being recorded. Whatever you do here, the world will see. The man hesitated. Then he ripped off his mask. It was Marcus Brennan, the company's CFO, Victor's accomplice. You're too late, Marcus said. The money's already offshore. Victor takes the fall. I walk away clean. Not if I have anything to say about it, Clara said. Marcus pulled out a gun. Then I guess you won't. He aimed at Clara. Daniel dove, tackling him. The gun fired, the bullet striking Daniel in the shoulder. He collapsed, blood spreading across his shirt. Ella screamed, "Daddy!" Clara grabbed the gun as it skidded across the floor. She pointed it at Marcus. "Don't move." Marcus raised his hand, smirking. "You won't shoot." "Try me." Police sirens filled the air. Officers poured into the warehouse surrounding Marcus. Clara dropped the gun and ran to Daniel. He was conscious, barely, his hand pressed against the wound. "Ella," he whispered. "Is she? She's safe. You saved her." He smiled weakly. "Good." Paramedics arrived, working quickly to stabilize him. They loaded him onto a stretcher. Clara held his hand. "You idiot. Who gave you permission to save the whole world alone?" He laughed, then winced in pain. "I just wanted my daughter to grow up believing good people don't disappear." Ella ran over, crying, "Daddy, don't leave me." "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise." They loaded him into the ambulance. Clara and Ella climbed in beside him. As they drove towards the hospital, Clara looked at Daniel's pale face and made a silent vow. She would make this right, all of it, no matter what it took. 1 month later, the scandal broke wide open. Victor was arrested. Clara was reinstated as CEO. Before the entire staff, she publicly apologized to Daniel. "A man taught me that dignity doesn't depend on titles." Daniel declined to return to the company, choosing instead to open a repair shop and live near his daughter. Clara visited, bringing Ella a new set of books, saying, "You can attend Sterling's scholarship program for free." Symbol of rebirth, Daniel replanted lavender around the house, the flowers his wife used to love. Clara helped him water the plants, sunlight shining over her shoulder. She said, "You know, I still have that shirt from that morning." "What for?" "To remind me that kindness doesn't need proof." Little Ella chimed in. "So will Miss Clara eat Christmas dinner with us?" Clara laughed. "If your dad agrees." Daniel smiled, silent, but in his eyes there was something warmer than melting snow. The day Clara was reinstated, she walked into the boardroom with her head held high. The same board members who had turned against her now stood and applauded. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded and took her seat. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have work to do. Sterling Group has lost trust. We need to rebuild it, and that starts with transparency." Over the next few weeks, Clara implemented sweeping reforms: independent audits, ethics training, whistleblower protections. She also created the Daniel Hayes Integrity Award, given annually to employees who demonstrated moral courage. When she told Daniel about it, he shook his head. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You showed me what real leadership looks like." Daniel's repair shop became a quiet success. Neighbors brought broken appliances. Local businesses hired him for maintenance work. He was good with his hands, patient with problems, fair with prices. Ella helped after school, organizing tools, greeting customers, learning her father's trade. One afternoon, Clara stopped by. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair in a simple ponytail. Not the polished CEO, just Clara. "Need help?" she asked. Daniel looked up from the engine he was fixing. "You know how to use a wrench?" "I can learn." He handed her a tool. "Tighten that bolt, gently." She did, concentrating hard. When it was secure, she looked up, grinning. "How was that?" "Not bad. You might have a future in repair work." "I'll keep my day job." They worked side by side for an hour, not talking much, just existing together. It felt natural, comfortable. Right. Later, they sat on the porch watching Ella play in the yard. "She's happy," Clara said. "Yeah, she is. You did that. You gave her stability, love, Safety. I tried. Clara looked at him. You succeeded. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Clara, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you keep coming back here? You have your company, your life. You don't owe me anything. She considered the question carefully. Because this is the first place in years where I felt like I could breathe about, where I wasn't CEO Clara Voss, just Clara. And who is Clara? I'm still figuring that out, but I think she's someone who wants to be around people who see her, not her title. Daniel nodded. Well, Clara, you're always welcome here. She smiled. Thank you. As winter deepened, Clara became a regular visitor. She brought books for Ella, helped Daniel with projects, stayed for dinner. One evening after Ella went to bed, Daniel and Clara sat by the fireplace. I've been thinking, Clara said. About what? About second chances, about how rare they are. Yeah, I don't want to waste mine. Daniel looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, I spent 3 years hiding, grieving, throwing myself into work so I wouldn't have to feel. But being here with you and Ella, I feel again. And it's scary, but it's also alive. Daniel reached over and took her hand. Life is scary, but it's better when you don't face it alone. Is that an invitation? Maybe. Clara laughed softly. You're not very romantic, you know that? I'm a single dad who fixes engines. Romance isn't really my thing. That's okay. I think I prefer honesty. They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the fire burn. Outside, the lavender Daniel planted was just beginning to sprout, tiny green shoots pushing through the cold earth. New life, new beginnings. Clara stayed until late, then reluctantly stood to leave. I should go. Daniel walked her to the door. Drive safe. I will. She paused, then leaned up and kissed his cheek. Good night, Daniel. He smiled. Good night, Clara. As she drove away, Daniel touched his cheek, feeling the warmth of her lips still lingering. And for the first time since his wife died, he felt hope. 1 year later. Christmas morning, snow falling again. In the small kitchen, 3 people made coffee together. Ella laughed. Dad, who's wearing whose shirt today? Clara blushed. Daniel smiled. Doesn't matter, as long as we're warm. She placed a small gift on the table, the old bracelet, now replated, with a new engraving added, Stay brave, together. Daniel looked at her. You know, that morning I thought fate was mocking me. Clara replied, no, fate was just fixing the mistakes we made to ourselves. They looked at each other in silence, snow outside melting into bright droplets. The message, sometimes miracles don't come from grand gestures, but from a morning where 2 people who once hurt each other dared to forgive. The year had been full of changes, small ones, quiet ones, the kind that matter most. Clara had stepped back from some of her CEO duties, delegating more, trusting her team. She made time for things she'd neglected. Reading, painting, living. Daniel expanded his shop, hired an assistant, started teaching repair skills at the community center. Ella thrived. Top of her class, bright, kind, full of questions about the world. And the 3 of them, separately and together, had become something like a family. Not rushed, not forced, just natural. Clara had her own place in the city, but she spent most weekends at Daniel's house. She had her own drawer in the bedroom, her own mug in the kitchen, her own spot on the couch. Ella called her Miss Clara less and less. Sometimes it was just Clara, and once, accidentally, Mom. Clara had frozen when she heard it. Ella had turned bright red, apologizing. But Clara had knelt down, taken Ella's hands, and said, you can call me whatever feels right. I'm just happy to be here. On Christmas morning, they woke early. Ella burst into Daniel's room. Wake up! It's Christmas! Clara was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, wrapping last-minute gifts. Daniel shuffled in, hair messy, wearing the same shirt Clara had worn that first morning. She grinned. That looks familiar. I thought you'd appreciate the callback. I do. Ella opened her presents. Books, art supplies, a telescope. I can see the stars, she exclaimed. Just like your dad always wanted, Clara said. Ella hugged them both. Best Christmas ever. After breakfast, they went outside. The snow was fresh, untouched. Ella made snow angels. Daniel built a snowman. Clara took pictures, capturing every moment. Later, as the sun set, they sat together on the porch. This time last year, Clara said, I thought my life was over. And now, Daniel asked. Now I think it's just beginning. Daniel pulled out the bracelet Clara had given him. He'd had it adjusted to fit. Stay brave, together, he read aloud. I like that. Me too. Ella yawned, leaning against Clara. Are you staying tonight, Clara? If that's okay. It's always okay. As the stars came out, the three of them sat in comfortable silence. No grand declarations, no dramatic moments, just peace. Clara had spent years chasing success, power, control. But here, in this small house with these two people, she'd found something better. She'd found home. Daniel looked at her, snow dusting her hair, and thought about how strange life was. How a blizzard and a mistake had led to this. To her. To them. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For giving us a chance, Clara smiled, tears in her eyes. Thank you for saving me. Anytime. And as the snow continued to fall, they sat together, watching the world turn white and clean and new, ready for whatever came next, together. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Hidden Heart Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.